Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Plus Three Futures and Commodities show. We are recording Friday afternoon right near the close. My name is Ben Maldonado, and as always, I'm here with my partner, Barrie Hederachi. Barrie, it's August 11th.
Well,
Summer's
we're
almost over.
halfway through.
Summer's almost over, man.
Yeah.
And it's turning out we were a little bit prophetic here when we said August was not going to be boring.
No,
it was not going to be your usual sleepy August. We've had lots of action across many markets, and today I'm going to talk about bonds, cotton, nat gas. Barrie, as he always, is going to cover Big Five, as we call it, which is ES, bonds, gold, copper, crude, and the dollar and the euro. So there's a lot to cover. There's been a lot of movement in these markets, and we're going to try and review it, make sense of it, and see if we can give you a decent idea of what's most probable to happen next. Well, here we've got Bitcoin. That's where we always start. And even, given the big up we saw and then the big down we've seen in markets in the last few weeks, in the last month or so, look at Bitcoin. It's just basically been in a range since March or April, if you really look at it. And we keep holding here at this, this full square level. It tested it multiple times this week, popped up, and now we're sort of drifting back to it. There's just no juice in this market right now, and you have to wait. At least in the way I do it and the way Barrie does it, you kind of got to wait for the market to give you the signal, and we're just not getting a signal yet here. Anything else you would say on this one, Barrie? We don't need to spend a lot of time because it is perfectly sideways. But anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I would say it really is perfectly sideways.
Mm-hmm.
Because for it to actually pick up any kind of upside, we have to get above at least 29,782, let's say, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
Have a half a square line there. And to really kind of get into weakness, we have to get below, let's say, 28,934, 935, something in there. So we're in between those points, and it's a really sticky point. And it's still, on the whole, it's positive, right? On the whole, it's okay. It's up there.
Absolutely.
And so we'll see. I mean, really, markets like this, you want to see how it breaks on that first 1 or 2 day counter trends where you can actually have a little trade. So we'll have to wait and see. And
a good example, if we go back, about a month ago or so, is, remember, crude oil was sideways for 5-6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was frustrating everybody. And we had our points up and down, which you'll review, but we had the points. And we waited till it broke, and when it broke, the thing moved, $10 in a week.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the way these markets move, and I think we just got to wait for the signal in Bitcoin, because for now, it's perfectly sideways is the perfect description. Anyway, let me throw it over to you, and let's get into and see what happened this week and what looks like is coming next week. Man, that zone was the death zone, wasn't it? Just killed it.
That was a zone, took care of business.
Yep.
Well, and we had plenty of time counts going up in there, so it's not like
it's shocking.
Yeah, no, it's not shocking, and rather kind of expected, right?
Yeah, and look at your 44.75 doing its job there too.
Mm-hmm. It's holding in there. Not sure how well, but at least hopefully enough for the next counter trend.
Right.
We'll see how that works out. So last week, what was the number we were left with? It was 45.54.
Yeah, and the 45.70 to 45.54.
Yeah, if we get up into any counter trends.
Yeah.
So as you can see, we didn't even get anywhere near it.
Nope.
And if we look at let me see if I can find our 30-minute chart. So just for you guys to see, sort of the details of what happened. The slow motion shot.
Right.
The 30-minute. You can see how, we got down the prior week, came down, and really the 45.54, 45.90, that's way up here. So 45.54, this is where we had that band. And we had a zone between 45.44 and 54, just a 10-point band. And you can see how we couldn't even, we tried to get up there on the 7th, tried to get up there late 9th, 8th, late 8th overnight market. Then on the 10th, all of them just really failed. And before yesterday, we were coming back into the lower zone, which was around 44.84, 44.90 zone, and we bounced off of it. And it was after the CPI, we had a little bit of a shakeout, rallied again, and now we're hanging out in here. So what we left off intraday was really till we can get above 44.90. The momentum's really not going to shift to the upside, at least for traders. So long as we're below this zone here, this band between 84 and 90, we're treating it as if it's in a weak position. So that's kind of the view from the smaller time frames. So getting back into the daily, we all know about the high that came in, and I wanted to show you. So here's the calendar day, right? So we had a 90-day run from this low. And that was the primary sort of the final cycle we were looking at, because you want to see a 90-day run coming into to close that leg, which started down here. And we have other cycles that run up into the same area. And that being the case, it would be healthy for it to at least get down into this 44.27, 44.30, 25, this area to really check out that where we broke out of this little consolidation. So that would be normal. And really the next important thing is to see what that next counter trend is. Are we going to make a little new high? Are we going to make a new high and a false break? Or are we going to make a sort of a lower high and then sell off? So I think that's what's left for us next week. And 44.75, like you said, we came down into it, got under a little bit, but then we got bought up. Now we're back above 44.75 by a few points. We'll see how it goes, but I think this area is probably the area to watch next week. You can see we had these old highs from June up in the same area, so we're coming back from above. So for next week, pretty much the same story. Until we get above, let's say 45.50 or so, it's really going to be in weak hands. And I'm not going to expect anything great unless intraday, we get some kind of a low, which we had in 4 hour. This low here looks like kind of exhaustion sell-off. And we'll see how that works out next week. But for now, it's really the 44.50 area really is the one we have to watch, unless we can get down into 44.45 level, like the level that we talked about here. 44.54, I'm sorry, 44.54, 44.50. If we get in here and kind of flush everything out, which would just break right through that trend line, we can do a wash and then back on up. But for now, what's happened is every rally every counter trend has been weak. This counter trend, this one, they're all failing under that 45, 44 level, and not even getting anywhere near even 45, 50, right? I mean, it just keeps failing. So for next week, we'll watch that. We'll continue to watch the counter trend and see if we can settle above this 45.50 is really the level we have to work with. And what are we looking for? We're looking really to see what the next. If you look at all the cycles that expired up at the high, you could almost say we have a high in place. All right. So the next question would be, well, let's watch. What's the price action going to tell us? Well, it's going to tell us two things. Either we're going to go run up and make a new high, or we're going to make a lower high and sell off. So we're going to look for both of those things. If it's a higher high, we'll watch it. We'll watch it during the week. We'll watch the levels that we post on Twitter. And if you guys want to follow us on Twitter, all the information's in the description below. And while you're doing that, if you like our work, please click the likes and share and maybe subscribe. That's great. But we do post all of this stuff, intraday stuff, on Twitter, so you guys can follow. And sometimes having a 4 hour, 30-minute kind of a level tipping you off is really nice, because you don't have to wait till the whole daily drama is taking place, right? You can have
it's very helpful. Yep.
Yeah, you kind of have an early warning. So yeah, I think, was that clear enough for that? Basically, we're looking for counter trends next week.
I mean, I think it's clear you and I agree on this that the tide has shifted, and so now it's sort of looking at the counter trends going up to get a clue as to how is this high going to unfold.
Yeah, and the levels we're watching would be like if we can't even get about 45.50 next week, first couple 3 days, then clearly there's a tremendous amount of weakness, and we're probably going to go down into at least this 4,400 level, which just happens to be the 50% level on this square.
Mm-hmm.
So that wouldn't be too far fetched.
No, not at all. Not at all.
So a lot of downside potential is intact if we can't get above that 45.50 level. So that's a nice way to, I think, frame that.
Mm-hmm.
The downside is not quite finished till we do that. Although today's low did come in at a good level on at least on the 30-minute charts. We came very close to 44.55 level area, was about 180 degrees down from the high. So, enough to cause some kind of a counter rally. So we have that in place. We'll see how that goes. Let's take a look at the weekly.
Yeah, it's always a sign of the turn when you see trend lines starting to get broken.
Well, it's funny. We talked about this almost 36-week run, right?
Mm-hmm.
And well, we have 39 weeks. That's fine. But the steep trend line, I remember drawing that out and saying, these steep trend lines, they don't last forever. And when they break, they're going to break
mm-hmm.
and kind of hard. So far as the weekly goes, we have 2 weeks down. We don't have a counter trend anywhere near. So it would be sort of healthy to have a rally next week and to see how that goes.
Mm-hmm.
If the market is strong, that's what should happen. After like 2 weeks down, we should get some kind of a bounce normally. So we'll see. And if it's weaker, we could certainly go down a couple of more weeks and then start the counter trend. Either way, we know we have something up here at the high, so we're not jumping in to buy this at this point. We're kind of treating it cautiously because we're tiptoeing around this high, potentially a big high. Because if you look at the weekly, just think we're looking at a high, a sell-off, and a lower high.
That's
right?
big.
Yeah, and that's huge. So on a weekly basis, let's not forget, even with the weekly chart, we can easily get pulled into, zoomed into what's happening right now, right? Without really paying attention to everything.
It's funny in the NQs that I'm going to go over when you throw it back to me. I actually have us looking at the weekly for that exact reason.
Mm-hmm. So we do have, high. Here's a lower high. We'll see how that works out. But we got to keep all that in mind, especially because we had all these cycles that expired up here.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's move on to bonds. Bonds have been good lately.
Nice. They keep bouncing and then failing, bouncing and failing.
Yeah.
It's a perfect short.
Yeah, bonds are doing great. So if you guys, these are the times to trade this, right? When everything's working. And we're not stuck in some kind of a range. And you can see after we broke out of, you're going to talk about, I think you were going to talk about consolidations and Bitcoin. We talked about that going sideways and then
you get the move. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So here's a classic example, right? We had all this sideways price action and then all of a sudden broke, rally, sold off again, rally, selling off
sold
again.
Sold off again. Yep.
But if you guys have been following us, watching this, we've been bearish, forever. And now where it's hitting the key points, here we had this support at these two lows and we called it out as a quarter of the square. And what happened was we broke below it. And then what happened after that?
Tested it.
We came back and we tested it yesterday with the number and reversed. And now we took out yesterday's low. So we've been looking for it to go lower and to check this low and probably take it out. Worst case, it'll go out and make a false break or whatnot and rally, just like we did, here. We had this low, came down, false break, rally, failed again.
Certainly looks the way where it's heading, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's how markets go in slow motion, right? They just have to do their thing, and if you just watch it carefully, it'll stop at the right places. So the next stop, we're looking for it to test the October lows. That's around 117, 120 right now. Moving on to bonds, weekly bonds, pretty much going as expected. We had this big widening triangle range. We had a low, went up to the high, and eventually it looks like we're going to come down and tap the bottom, the lower trend line, which is around 117 if it gets there.
Yep.
And if we're going to get that close, then I've been saying this 144 is really going to be
the target.
the target, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the real bad news is going to be once we get stuck under that and we're trying to get remember all this price action here, this block that I've pushed out here.
Mm-hmm.
I can put out a bit further. Like that block, once we break and we start coming back, this is all overhead.
Yep.
Right. So there's a lot of selling left in there. So, we'll see how that works out, but just thinking ahead a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, 114 would be the 144 target.
Hit that target. Beautiful targeting.
Yeah, man. Targets have been, they've been good. Not only hit it, but it also held it, right?
Yeah.
And so where we left off from last week was we wanted to see it get above the half, which it did. We got the lows down here. We were waiting for it to clear, hold above 64, break above 73. It's been doing everything correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And then we wanted to have it hold above the 50%, which it did. Now we're just right at the target box, which we drew out a couple of weeks ago, maybe last week. So 83 is the thing, and it's really about settling above that. And it's trying.
It is trying.
It's really trying. So we'll give it next week and see. I mean, it might slip one day just to kind of wash everybody out. But, those surprise crude numbers that come out all of a sudden in the morning.
Right.
Could do that. But eventually, it's going to be something like this, where price decides 83 is the low.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, we know we're probably clear to get up into 91. And remember, this 83 is no joke. You can see ever since last November, even before that, this number really had something to do with it, except for this little drop in September. Really, it held really well above it. And then once we got under it, you can see how
got stuck.
Yeah, since November, it's been below. So it's not an easy thing to actually even get to where we are now. But it tells me, the price action tells me this is not a false break above this. It's just not the kind of action that you'd see because there's a persistent buying coming in. So we'll see if it settles above 83 next week. I think we have a nice run, and I think all those oil stocks are showing us that it's probably headed higher because they're heading higher.
Absolutely. I mean, the crude is strong. We came up and tapped my full square. So, taking some profit at a full square resistance is never a bad idea after a good run.
Absolutely. So here's our weekly crude. And, you guys have been watching this. We've had a good weekly run. And I keep saying it might be good to have some kind of a counter trend, but that might be coming after we hit 93, which we could do in one day, really.
Good.
Not that far.
Yeah, good.
And the good news is, look what happened to this week's low, right? If you look at this line right at 79, let's say 80, it's really the 5/8 line of 90 coming in a 45 square up here. And you can see how we had all these highs right in there. It really settled in. False break up here before we sold off. And this week, the low held perfectly above that. And we went higher than prior week. So this is fairly bullish. So I feel like we could probably go up and tap, maybe check up above that, which would be really, 86 or so. And from there, 93 is right in here, which would be checking out these highs.
Yeah.
So it's not too bad.
I mean, it's definitely bullish. It's just as you said, we've got 6-7 week run. A 1 week pullback would not be out of the question.
No, it wouldn't.
Oh, there you go. There's the resistance.
Yeah. So I just wanted to show you guys, if we go from the high, we're coming right up into the 45 degrees from the high, and you can see the lows came in square and a half.
Mhm.
So we're up in here, and it wouldn't surprise me if we decide to base in this, in this area here.
Right. It doesn't have to collapse. It could just chop sideways for a couple
Yeah,
of
I
weeks
mean,
or a month.
well, chopping in here is very bullish,
Yeah,
at this point.
completely. Completely.
So we'll see how that works out. But that's kind of our view. Like I said, like Ben just said, a little bit of a counter trend pullback wouldn't be bad, but this is very strong. There's a
Mhm.
lot of persistent buying,
Agreed.
and you don't want to get in the front of that.
Mm-mm.
Let's take a look at gold. The fate of the boxes.
Right. The box
So
nailed the high, basically.
nail the high, and we couldn't really stay above this 90, so that level. And then we talked about this 1940 really being the deal. And if anything, if gold's in a decent shape, we should probably base in here somewhere.
Barry, watching this and looking at this chart, I've seen a lot of this in many different markets. And near the end, let's remind us to talk about when we sort of crisscross a full square, what that means and how you handle that.
Hey, Reed, that's a good
That's a good topic.
Very technical.
Gold's doing it, silver's doing. I mean, a lot of these markets are doing it. They're crisscrossing at important points. Nat gas is doing it. The grains are doing it. So it's a good thing to talk about.
Yeah, let's take a look at that. And here I would say the gold, if we lose 1940, I think we have a lot more weakness in gold left. At this point, we can't really lose 1940. So hopefully, if you're bullish on gold, we want to see it holding above 1940. And if we slip that, then 1887 area, maybe we'll go back and down this, check this low.
Barry, put an ABCD on from the high and see where that goes down to.
Up to there, yeah.
Yeah, I'm interested to see if it's doing something like that.
Looks a little scary from here, but
like about 1860, 1850.
Well, yeah.
Oh, even lower.
Right, yep, right into that 1814 area, which is right there. And
yeah,
well, that would definitely get everybody, all the gold bugs off the.
I would shake them off the trail. Right,
it would shake everybody off at this point.
Right,
and that would correspond. If we get a dollar run corresponding to that drop, well, it would all set up perfectly.
Yeah.
Along with future inflation. So we'll see how
it's not a predictor, but it's just something to notice, right?
Yeah.
Be aware of.
Well, I would say if 1940 goes, the way we do it, we go in kind of baby steps. So 1940, then we got this 1887. Not quite baby steps, but that's a bit of a drop. But anyway.
Yeah.
If that goes, then I think we're going to complete this, and we'll have to see how that plays out. And if that's the case, we have a Gartley right here.
I was going to say the Gartley's right there. So let's see where the equilibrium lines are. See what where support might be. Oh, there you go.
That looks decent. Looks like the slopes are good. And how do you like that? 1940 right there.
Right at your XB, right?
Exactly. So let's see how that works. I'll leave it on here next week. It'll be fun.
Yeah, we'll just mess around. Let's see.
Follow it and see.
Yeah.
But anyway, now you guys know and what to expect and what not to expect. Looking at the gold weekly, well, we talked about the 2000 last week, right? I said, hey, there's the resistance on the basis weekly. You can see how we opened and closed. We opened right at that level and couldn't really hold above 2000, and we sold off.
There's sellers there for sure.
And well, there's 1919 basis weekly is next level.
But the weekly, if you zoom out, looks a hell of a lot more bullish, right? Look at this, basically sideways since the the highs in 2020.
Well, the thing is, this is bullish because as long as we're holding above this 180 right here, and you guys can see that 180.
Yeah.
And that's around, what's the price here?
16 something.
Yeah, let's
1700.
Let's say 1700, right? It's 1670. Let's say 1670. Fine. So long as we're talking new high, all-time highs here. We're just messing around up here. So this is not bearish. It's just we're consolidating at very strong level.
Yeah,
And long as
agreed.
we're above the 1670 area, you know, that's why this box was really important. And that's why when this came in, when that false break came in, we talked about that. I remember that.
Yeah,
The whole
yeah,
thing was that's how they flush you out. You know, here's another good lesson, right? They
right.
flush you out. And after that, look at this next bar, how big that bar was. Remember?
Wow.
We were, like blown away.
Yeah.
And then, of course, and look at this big bar. Every time we clear a level, cleared 1881, bam, right? Cleared this, bam. So
So they're basically filling up their inventory and then they run it and then they gun it.
yeah. And we just have to make sure we're alert to this, right? And not
Yeah.
get pulled into the. We talked about sentiment, I think, last week or the week before, how news and all of this affects us, and
Yeah.
and
At the
this is part of
highs.
the game, right? Because
Right.
when you see price action that's scary.
Right.
Anyway, there's another Gartley here. You know,
Yeah.
this low XABC. So anyway, we'll keep an eye on these things for now. We have 1919 basis weekly as support, and we have 1814 over here as a final. We'll go with that and see how it all plays out. Moving on to copper, kind of following in the footsteps of gold.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't quite hold up above the 50% of the square. And what else? We broke the trend line, right?
Mm-hmm.
And after that, that was it. So I'm guessing for the weakness, copper is not quite done then. It needs to recycle back through. And these double bottom kind of things are never going to hold. So we're probably going to go a little lower.
Right.
And we'll let it consolidate and come back. I mean, lower prices for copper would be amazing because that's always a good buy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's just not ready yet. We'll follow through. The key would have been if it could have held above the 50%, that 383 area that we always talk about. So now
And
it looks like, yeah.
I was going to say, the copper chart and the gold chart, almost all the commodities are looking like that now.
Yeah.
Sloppy, choppy, not finished yet. So, we'll discuss that briefly, but copper's, I think, a great example.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're
not bearish, but just not ready to go.
Right.
Especially when you zoom out, like on the weeklies or the monthlies, it's really, really bullish.
Well, I mean, this angle is almost a 45, not quite.
Right.
So, I mean, holding above that means copper is in a strong position.
Yeah.
But you can see how we rallied up right into the 50% before we gave it up, right in there last week.
And if you look a little bigger, it's just a giant triangle from the high.
Yeah, that's true. This one.
Yeah.
This triangle right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we talked about that last week. If we can't get above that, we're probably going to get some kind of a correction, go back down and check it. So the key thing is we hold above the lower fork. And even if we fail that, we talked about this 335 area, this 90 up from this low is really the main balance point for coppers, and we're well above that. Let's see how it consolidates, let it finish what it's doing.
Barry, talking about news, look at what copper's doing, which on a weekly basis, it's basically triangulating, right? It's not bearish, It's not bullish, it's triangulating.
Right.
And the news is the second largest economy in the world, China, is entering a period of deflation and a depression potentially. And before, if you would have said anything like that about China and demand wasn't going to be there, they would crash copper. They would just crush copper.
True.
So it's again, you got to separate from the news and just say, okay, what are prices telling me? And bigger picture, copper still looks good.
Yeah, copper, I don't think is going to be out of our range or not completely dropped off or ignored.
Right.
From here on for a while. So let's see how it consolidates. It looks pretty good. So,
yeah, let's see what happens. What do you got next? The dollar?
Yep. Let's go look at the dollar, which is kind of doing what we expected.
Yeah. That ABCD launched it.
Hey.
Yeah.
So it might be fourth grade stuff, but it works.
Sure does. It's really simple.
Well, if you know
really
how to use
good.
It, where to use it. So yeah, we had the ABCD, we had the low come in. Perfect. We were expecting it, if it's strong, to hold above the 50%, which it did. This box was sort of the resistance zone. And what did we do? We got on top of it. This is, you guys, when we talk about getting on top of a zone, this is really kind of what we talk about. You see how we got up, stayed above, right? And
Yep.
from here on up,
Tested it,
yeah,
tested
and
it.
these are the lows you can trade to the upside, right? Boom, boom,
Yep.
boom. And once we get above this 1/3 line, which is right around 102.75 or so, which we're above. I mean, once we settle above that, pullbacks can maybe come up to 102.5 or so. You know, we're good, and we take out. You know, systematically we'll be taking out levels, and we'll be going back up to check the 105 square from up there. Anyway, dollar looks okay. It's kind of doing what we thought, which is nice, always nice. And here we have the dollar weekly, where, well, we called it as soon as we had this little break here. You know, we looked at that as a false break, and it's exactly what it was, because it snapped back, and look at that, we haven't looked back. And even this week we made a higher high over last week, so it's pretty good.
Yep. And that's an example of not clearing a level, right? We got below the 90, couldn't clear it, and then look what happens. You get the boomerang the other way.
We snap back, and then you can see even there
the test,
not the low, but the bar after that, we came back to check that exact level, right?
Yep.
And then rallied. So it looks like we're good. I mean, if anything, technically, let's take a look at you know, we have a trend line up there, so that's a little
triangle.
Yeah, little triangle. So that's up in the 103.75 level. So we have a little bit of room left to run. We'll deal with it when we get there. For now, it looks like it's doing it.
Yep.
And the euro is kind of doing it the other way.
Yep.
We were talking about how we would have to hold this level to be strong, and well, it's trying, but you can also see how the selling has come in. Unlike if it were bullish, you know, you got a lot of buying coming in, right? Although it's a triangle, you know, we are putting a little bit of triangle in here. It's messy, but looking at where the dollar is, looking at where the euro is, and knowing that we had ABCD finishing this leg up, I think lower prices are not going to be a big surprise, especially if we hold out, we start trading below 110, and counter trends hold below 110. I think it's weaker. I mean, we've been, I think you guys can tell we're bearish on the euro. We've been bearish on the euro, and we ain't hiding it. So
nope.
It's just what it is. I mean, how could you not be? This thing's going straight down, you know. So, right? Look at this. Is it not a bear market? I mean, what are you excited about? Well, we can get excited about this killer rallies that you get in between.
Right. And
now I've been highlighting this leg that we matched, and how that usually nails corners in intermediate sort of range legs, and looks like it did that. This 109.5 was really
that's a beautiful level.
Yeah, and we wanted to see it be under that, and we got under that, and now
there you are.
It's definitely to the short side, and that's how we're going to treat it.
It's weak.
Yeah. And what else do I have? You going to cover natural gas?
Yeah, I'll cover gas today.
Just getting some life in it.
Yep.
And the only other thing was a Hang Seng, just to say, speaking about China, and it's really interesting, right? Because we talked about this 2380 being resistance, and you know, we should probably sell off after that. Well, sure enough, we got exactly to the halfway point, which is the next quarter of the square, right? And we spent 4 days there. Well, look at that, Ben. Couldn't quite hold that line. Now, here's a good example of breaking below and staying below.
Yes, sir.
Right?
So unlike ES, which Barrie very well reviewed, here we've already had, you know, the first down. There's your first pullback, right? So we got a lower high in place on NQs on the daily. And as Barrie said, importantly, we got below, and then see this bar where it tried to push through, tried to get back above, and it basically kissed the underside of the trend line, and then see you later.
Right.
So NQs led on the way up. As of now, they're leading on the way down. Because we've had the first pullback on the daily. We've gotten stuck below an important level. We're seeing decent weakness there. The next spot, and by the way, all these levels are on a Google Doc spreadsheet, which I will post the link to when we post the link to this week's video. It's right now 14,955 is your next support, which is here, the half square.
Mm-hmm.
We lose that, then it's full square. I mean, you can just look at it like a ladder, right? Going up, going down. So right now, this market is bearish. We've had a lower high and now a lower low. And if you look at the structure here, Barry, it almost looks like this is the acceleration wave, right? Because if it was an ABCD, it would have stopped somewhere in here.
Exactly.
I mean, it still could like have pushed it. Like markets always push it a little further, and if we rally up, you can say, okay, it did an ABCD, but it's right as of now, it's weak. So I don't think there's a lot to add to that. The only thing I wanted to show is bigger picture, which you were talking about in the ES. Here's your NQ, lower high.
Right.
In place.
Yep.
So
that's a good pattern.
It is a good pattern. And what do we always talk about, right? First leg down, second leg back up on a pullback, and then this could be the big potential for the big wave.
Right.
And you want to put yourself in these situations. Does it happen every time? Absolutely not. But if you put yourself in enough situations where you got this kind of setup, you know, good things can happen. And this is weekly. This isn't like a 5-minute chart. This is weekly.
Right.
So this could be significant, right? And we have to watch on. If you're watching on a weekly basis, you want to see it stay below this next on the pullback, this half square, which is, call it, 15,620. That's the key there, staying below that. So the time cycles and everything that we've been talking about for a month or so now had an effect, and now we're starting to see how it's playing out. It looks to me like NQs are leading ES right now, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Anything else you want to add in here that stands out to you on the chart?
Well, it's right on, your 50% square should be good support, because I have support right at 15,020, and
that's right in here. Yep.
Between that and then 14,700. Where's that? Where's 14,700 on yours?
About here.
Right there. Okay.
Right about there.
So there's a little zone in there, potential support zone.
Right. And it wouldn't be surprising to get a little congestion here, because we got congestion over here. So we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. But right now, it leans towards the bearish side because we're losing levels, lower highs, lower lows.
Right.
Okay, let's jump to the commodities. We don't have a lot to review because, as I was talking during Barrie's segment when he was showing copper, a lot of them sort of look like copper, where they're correcting. They've still got work to do to the downside or sideways, or it's choppy. Not areas that we want to be in, given the bigger picture we're looking at the commodities. However, there are a few that I think we ought to look at. One Barrie covered, so we'll just do something real quick here. On the 30-year, this is on a daily basis. This is a really important level. You can see we've only spent in the last year or so 10, 15 days below that level. We're closing below it today. So they need to, it needs to reverse and get back above here, or it could get slippery. And, you've been saying it needs to test these lows and potentially take them out. That's where, yeah, that's where it looks like we're heading. Yeah. And it could be soon. Then the big thing is we want to watch the next pullback. Do we get stuck below this, call it 121.18 area, 121, 122? If we get stuck below there on any kind of rally, that's going to be bad news for people that are bullish on bonds. So that's bonds. Let's go into the regular commodities. The one we want to look at. We've been talking about this for a while, and looky what it did this week. Look how we ended the week.
Yep. Breakout.
Yes, that's only like the second close since October in this above this channel, and the last one being a few weeks ago.
Right.
Now this thing looks ready. It's every time it pulls back, it's doing what you want to see a bullish market do, which is make a higher low, have people come in, buy it up. And the up bars are big and the down bars aren't so big. So cotton looks good. Let me see. I think I've got a weekly look I want to show you here too. Yeah, we're breaking out of the triangle. And this thing loves to move coming out of triangles. Look at this triangle here and the move you got out of this one. It loves triangles. So this is the first close outside of the weekly triangle, which started last September, October. So it's a pretty significant weekly close. This appears to me to be on the launch pad, and we may have, hit ignition this week. Yep. So let's go back to the daily. Anything else you want to add here? I know you look at it a little bit differently.
Well, I think that 84.29 you have there, any pullback that holds above that, I think we're in good shape.
Yeah. Yep. And that's a harmonic. Those yellow lines are harmonic balance points, which I've been talking about on Twitter. I posted all the levels for people to look at, and I'm just going to include them on the daily so you can see. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing when you're working with these levels, when they come in, you almost always see this battle around the level until one side takes control.
Right.
And it looks like today was the decision.
We know which side to control.
Yeah, that the bulls said, okay, it's enough futzing around this balance point. We're going to go. So we'll see. Do we get follow through next week? Odds favor we do. We'll see how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
But this cotton we've been tracking, and it's been painful for people who, bought in the chop. But if you've been able to hold through it, the bullish odds are still in your favor. So right. Cotton is moving. Last one we're going to look at is another one we've been talking about for a while, and it had some interesting moves this week, and that gas. And look where that thing closed, Barrie. Right on the full square. Again, it's that keeping you guessing for 3 more days, right? Until the futures open on Sunday night. But the pressure is definitely to the upside here. It's pushing. We had this big move, and I was talking to people. I said, we really on a pullback, we'd like to hold over this full square, which we didn't. We pulled back, and now we're just under the full square. So do we break out? Do we bust out and not only break the downtrend line, but get out of this congestion we've been in this sort of half square balance point that we've been in for a while? We'll see. I just think it's bullish, and it to me it's like it's telling me that time is up and it's getting ready to move. The really key point is if we clear this half square, this thing's gone. The first step is going to be we got to clear the full square. We clear that, then that means all of this consolidation is going to be below us, right? Which is very bullish. Sitting on top of that big long consolidation is super bullish. And if we sit on top of that, then we got to attack this, which is, if you look left, you can see we made lows there in late 21, early 22. And then we had a little bit of a consolidation on the way down. So this is going to be another key spot that's going to attack. And that level is like around 340, 341, 342. So you got 282 here and 342 here are your next key levels. But again, this is, to me, it's a matter of time, and it seems like the fuse is short for this thing to get going. Anything else to add here on nat gas before I show the weekly as well?
Well, I think last week we were talking about levels, and I had this 265 was my level, and I would say, long as we're above that, we're in really good shape to run here. Mm-hmm. I mean, if there's an opportunity to run, it will be from here.
Yeah,
I would say
to me, it's just a compressed spring right now. It's like when's it going to give? Right?
And I think a good market would be to see when we take out today's high next week. That could really get things rolling. So we'll see.
And that's right on the full square too, around 282.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly.
Here's your weekly. I wanted to show you the weekly, why we kind of pulled back. So we're in this triangle, this big weekly triangle. we pushed out, but just couldn't get out yet. Hopefully this coming week we get a close where we're out of this triangle, and that means we're off to the races. So it looks good. We never know the exact moment, but boy, is the weight of the evidence starting to pile up on this one.
Mm-hmm.
That's it for the commodities. I want to remind you, we wanted to talk about, like, when you have these full squares or you have these incredibly important levels,
Mm-hmm.
and we start crisscrossing it. What does that tell you, Barrie? Because I've talked with people about it on Twitter, but I think we really need to go into it because it's a really important point.
Crisscrossing where?
You had one like gold. We were crisscrossing the 90, I think it was.
Mm-hmm. Let me pull up the gold. Well, I mean, they all crisscross. I'm sure we can find.
There it is. There it is. There's the 90 right
This
there.
one? Okay.
Yeah. So I think it's important because we always talk about how the levels are so important. And in this case, we're looking at the 90.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get up against a level, you want to see, does it get stuck under it, or does it sit on top? I think it's important because that's clear, right? If it gets stuck under, it's bearish. If it gets on top, it's bullish. That's pretty easy
Mm-hmm.
to understand, and we've kind of showed them how things clear.
Are you talking about this kind of period here?
Yeah, like when we get on top, like we coming from underneath, we get on top, right? We pull back, sit on top, push up, and then we get stuck back again down below, and then start crisscrossing.
Like in here.
Yeah.
Right.
Like what's the message that price is telling you when you see that sort of price action?
Well,
how do you interpret that?
Yeah, well, that's good. So it's kind of a consolidation, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And it really depends. Are we getting that following a low or a high?
Mm-hmm.
That's really the other part of the equation. You want to know that. So let's say we're looking for some kind of a high, and the price comes in at the high. So here, we're 135 days up into a high, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And from here to here, we're a 45-day run. So that high we kind of nailed.
Right.
That was a high that, we have 2 cycles going in, and it made sense to watch for that. So before that, you're talking about, well, let's start from here and walk it through. How about that? You want to do that?
Sure, yeah.
So we had a low come in, and I actually remember calling this low, including this false break that we had to run up.
Right.
So we had to run up into, so here's another one. We get up to 50%, we pull back, and we run back up again. And here we're going crisscrossing. So what's the difference here? You always have to have a reference. So the reference for us is always a square chart.
Right.
And so in the square, we have levels, we have 50%, we have quarters, we have thirds, and you have to kind of know what the market is running with, or what's giving its traction. So in this case, we ran up 50% line, so we know 50% is active, came back down to the quarter, went back up to 50. So from here, you can see it's making higher lows here very easily, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in this crisscross, we know every time it's making a higher low, we know the push is to the upside. That's how I look at it. And this is a huge lesson. I think if everybody can just remember that part, it's going to be, it'll pay off in spades.
Right. So you look at the basic bar structure and say, are we making higher lows, higher highs, lower lows, lower highs? That's the first thing. The other thing you're saying, I think that's important, is where in the move is the crisscross happening?
Absolutely. So that's it. So here we can see their higher lows coming in, and we're moving up. We're moving up above it. Mm-hmm. And so we know the break is to the upside. Then we look at the momentum and everything, and we can start taking trades to the upside. And then we really have nothing till we get up into the 90. We go up to the 90. We tap it and we reverse. We'd expect it to not go any high. We would expect it to halt there.
Right.
Anyway, we got low, came back down. We came into this 814 area that we track, and didn't crisscross there, right?
Nope.
And we know
stayed above. Yep.
And we know that was a decent low because we went low 90 to 90, 90, yep. 90 low.
Yeah.
Fine. So we started picking up speed, went up into it. So we had the resistance before. So we're expecting, well, is it going to hold again? Right? Mm-hmm. What's going to happen next? Well, we made a new high. pulled back, another high. Now we're crisscrossing the 90, right?
Yep. Now
Came
we're
back.
crisscrossing.
So what are we getting? Again, we're getting higher lows,
Yep.
right? Right there, higher lows. Let me just draw a line, higher lows right there. And we're getting a bit of a triangle.
Mm-hmm.
So price action there is, well, if we're making higher lows, even if it's making lower highs, at the 90, we know at the 90, this kind of price action would be bullish at this
Correct.
point from here.
Mm-hmm.
Is it going to be bullish forever? No, but it's bullish from here.
Right.
And it was, we did A, B, C, D up, went up to the quarter line, which is right there. What happened from there? We'd expect some kind of a counter trend. We got that. Where did the counter trend hold?
Stayed on top of the 90.
Right on
Yep.
top of the 90. Is that bullish? Yeah. So it's not going across the chart, but it's still holding above. It's still sideways. But is it sideways we want to sell into? No, this is sideways you'd want to buy as soon as you get a signal.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the signal here? We get 3 days in a row, right?
Higher lows. Yeah.
And then boom, then we get this huge move and reverse. And that was also another 45 run. If
Yep.
you take it from this lower right there, it's 45-day run.
Sure.
Again, that's why you have to use price and time. And you can watch the time, and that's one signal. Then you have price. That's a second. And here we had time and price. So we back off, we cover, we take profits. And we come back down. Here's a higher low that we talked about, like the NASDAQ right now. We had the high, lower high right there.
Yep.
And we corrected all the way. And then we go up in here. Let's take a look. This is very good. So what happens here? We're in the middle and we're going. If you're somebody untrained eye might look at it and say, well, it's going sideways. But if you know price action, you're going to see like, hey, no, it's making lower highs.
Right.
Right? It's making lower highs, opposite of what was happening before.
Yep.
It's making lower highs. And you can see most of the body of the bar is below
the 90.
Below the 90, right? So now the triangle is sort of the other way. And if we can't clear up above that, it's just weak. And you can see how, we had that one huge kind of a flush. This is a real fake setup, man. This is a mind bender right there.
Yeah.
Right? We open, gap down, sell off, scare everybody, comes back up by the end of the day. Next day takes out the high.
Taps the 90.
On a Friday, I think trying to tell everybody, hey, we're going to go higher, but we know better. We know that's a 90. Right. And we see the pattern is we're making lower and lower highs. There's no way you're going to get pulled into that. So you're still tilted towards on the sell side. And what happens the next day, of course, we sell off. And so we move away from it. So there are two good examples. Here's an example of crisscrossing with higher lows.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the leg and the overall pattern, we're looking for a continuation, which it did. Yep. And it went up to the next quarter of the square of the next one, which is perfectly normal. And then we had this other crisscross on the same line, but the other way. Now we're seeing lower highs.
And the important thing, we just came off of a false break high to the downside.
Not only that, we had the
45-day up, right? So it's the same old story, right? It goes back to our basics, which is, okay, what's the price action? What's happening? How did you get here?
Yeah. So the thing is, everybody talks about price action and market structure, and there's all kinds of different ways to frame that, and that's fine. But the thing is, price action, where it happens in geometry matters.
Yeah.
A consolidation anywhere is not equal. If we're consolidating on a really important, especially at 90, you really want to watch to see, because it'll give you the signal to which way it's tilting, just like it did here, just like it did here, just like it did here. And look what it's doing here. What happened here, right? We saw it come back up, try to challenge it. You can see how you see this one. Here's the second fake out. We were laughing at the other one.
Yeah, look at that.
Right? Look at this one, right? We open, just wash out. Next day, gap open the other way.
Above the 90.
What's that?
Above the 90. Yeah.
So here, it was, I mean, this was a real, I mean, you got to give these guys like some gold medals, right?
Yeah.
What do? They sink the thing, right? All kinds of selling comes in. And the next day, they just gap the thing open. So all the little shorts are just done, cooked,
Right.
right?
Right.
And at the same time, they caught all the little guys going long over here, all bullish, bulled up, and started bringing it back down again. So here we don't have that much of a crisscross other than this little false move here. It's starting to get a little dirty.
Yep.
But once we get up right into this, let me see what the date is. If you get right into this outside bar, that's August 4th, 5th. What happens between the 4th and the 5th? We're outside. Next day is inside. Third day, we took out the inside low of the inside bar. So that's weakness again. Now we have a whole chain of lower lows. I mean, lower highs.
Yep.
So here we go. Lower high, lower high, lower high. And we're still going down into that. So, I mean, we don't talk about all these things every time because it's just, we don't have the time.
Right.
So, but if you guys can just kind of watch when we talk about, I mean, if you don't have the squares, it's a little bit difficult to use the same price levels that we do unless you're following Ben because he posts all these things, all the commodities. Well, you do it on the spreadsheet too, right? So
Sure.
So that's one. Otherwise, when we're talking about the basic patterns and the key levels for now, you guys can kind of see what the price action looks like on your screens, and maybe someday we can start doing live and people can ask questions, right? As we're talking.
Yeah, sure.
It'd be kind of
Sure.
cool.
I just think
Now-
it's really important. It's a really important subject because, in the fantasy world, gold acts or any price action acts just like this, right? It comes up, it taps the line, and then it automatically collapses like it did in January, February, right? That spot there. But you and I know more based on experience, it's more like most of the time it's like this other mess that we see.
Yeah,
where it gets to the level, it tries to go up and then it knocks it down and then they try to take it down and then it pushes up. I mean, just like that. Yeah.
Well, here's a really good
That's
case.
the norm. That's
about
the norm, right? That's what happens most of the time.
Exactly. I mean, here's a classic sort of expanding triangle happening, right?
Yep.
Right on a line. Again, this is exactly the point of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Here we are. And what happened here? It wouldn't give a clue. Remember, we were talking about it, and I'm like, listen, we just have to wait till we're clear about exactly what's going to happen. And
that's exactly
it just wouldn't give a clue. And if it's not giving a clue, we're not forced to take a trade. It's not trading is not like you have to know every bar what's going to happen for the next 6 months or next whatever, because it just matters to within the scope of your trading. If it's depending on what the normal average length of your trade, that's the only scope that you need. So here we weren't trading this, we were just looking for a clue. And the fact that we really couldn't hold above, and we had this one down bar last week, and that was the clue, right? As soon as we got that, what we'd say next, watch for the counter trends to fail. Isn't that the first thing we said?
Yep. One all you need is a one bar counter trend.
Yeah, 1 bar counter trend. And then, well, here's another one. I mean, here's the Dow. I was going to show this earlier, but didn't have enough time.
Same
but
thing.
Well, what's that?
It's the same thing, except just at the half square. That's all. Exactly.
So this 35,596 is a half square. And what happened here? I mean, look at this. This is what's beautiful about these squares and patterns is you can talk about some technical aspect, and you'll find examples everywhere.
Right.
So here it came up in here. We're stuck. We had the time 216 bars coming into it, half square. So we're squaring out here. So we're looking for clues. So what happened? We were sideways 3, 4, 5, 6 days up and down. No real clues. Then all of a sudden we had the break. And what happened after the break? It just couldn't get above this 35,596. You can see that, right?
We keep getting stuck
1,
under.
2,
Yep.
3, 4, 5 days and still under. So here we're seeing the lower highs playing out.
Right.
So that's really
that's the clue, right? That's the clue.
Yeah. And you go with that. And here, well, now that we're on the Dow, so 34,450 would be the big support area if we were to go down
and you can look, Barrie, look at the Dow for December. It's another example where we were crisscrossing the 72 and higher lows started coming in right before it pushed up.
You mean here, right?
Yeah, right in there. Yep.
Yeah, well, yeah, this was kind of tricky, right? Because
It's
it
very
didn't
tricky.
the chart, you can see it was kind of going because we had a high. This bar made a higher high, and this was a lower low, just by a
Right.
tad, right?
Right.
But then you can see we did the false break thing right there. So you have to really be flexible in how you
Yeah.
can't, you're always looking, you have to always act like you don't know and you're looking for clues. And you can see here what happened was the false break came in, and the next day we cleared the high of the false break bar, and that's the clue. And from there we rallied up into the quarter.
Yep.
So yeah, you really have to take price action with it, and it's everything. Like here's another one. We had lower highs, and we broke through. Counter trend failed. 2 days down. Okay, 2 days down, great. Now what do you do at this point? We're looking to see if the next counter trend is going to fail. And did it fail? No, it cleared. All right. What does that mean? Well, that was kind of a washout, and now we're going to go higher. So there you go.
No, the key is, again, it's price action, and then it's where are you in the move, right? How did you get there?
Man, it's always that, because it's easy to talk about.
Right. That adds context. And if you don't have that context, you can't properly calculate what are the odds of what's going to happen next.
Exactly. That's exactly right. That's why your full squares, half squares, those are the only things we focus on, because that helps to figure out the next leg, right?
No, that's exactly right.
And so here's another, this is 30-minute, you guys. So here's a good example, right?
Yeah,
so
really good example.
Here's a half square. Well, here it's very clean, actually. We're bouncing off
the numbers right.
Fairly cleanly.
Very good.
And even here, it was very clean right up to 45. So here it could get a little murky, but again, now we're staying clearly below this 44.90 area. You can see that. So it's not a good example of crisscrossing the square, but it's maybe here, but it was all weak. You can see again, lower lows,
lower highs,
lower highs, lower highs, and boom, and just couldn't do it. So yeah, that's kind of does that make sense?
Absolutely. Now that's a good thing, because I know that it can confuse some people when we talk about, you get to the level and then you have a decision that has to be made, right? Do you get stuck under? Do you get above? And that's the key distinction here. And when you crisscross, I think the stuff you pointed out, with the higher lows and the lower highs, it gives you that little edge, and making sure you have context, like, are you on a 45-day run? Are you near the end of a 90-day run? I mean, that kind of stuff, it helps you. It doesn't give you the answer, but it certainly helps you weigh the probability, right? If you've had a 90-day run and you're crisscrossing at an important square, there's a better than 50% chance it's going to go down, right? Or if it went up running into that, and that's what you gotta. That gives you that context.
Right.
Which
and we're
along with the price action gives you really good odds.
And I was going to say, we're in the measuring business. So we want to measure everything we can possibly get our hands on without getting overwhelmed, right? So here we have to look at structure. We have to look at time. We have to look at price. And we have to look at price action around these key levels when we're dealing with corners. So if we can just get that handful of numbers together and monitor those, I think it's a lot easier to sort of figure out. It's not that big of a mystery, right?
Right.
It's still a mystery, all right, but at least you have a fighting chance.
So this week, Barry, coming up, it's for me, it's cotton, it's crude, right? Because crude, we made a high into some resistance, so we got to see what crude's going to do from there. It's nat gas. It's bonds. Do we continue to see weakness in bonds? Because if you look at, you don't have to do the exact correlations, but you can see when bonds have been weak, risk has been weak. So I think and the dollar, for me, those are the big ones to be watching. Where's your focus this week?
Gosh, I think you covered them all. Of course, obviously we have the ES. And rest of it, I kind of got cut off on the Hang Seng, but
right.
I don't know how many people are trading that or watching it. It's good if you got stocks, if you're trading stocks in Hong Kong or out in that way, Hong Kong exchange. So it's kind of in a middle point. So it's interesting, all these news coming out. You mentioned Chinese news earlier. So
Right.
that consolidation that we had, well, it's here. Let me take a look at it.
Yeah.
So that consolidation right there, we had these 3 days of inside. It's kind of on a line too, right? Not that
Yep.
important, but it's a quarter line. So if we, this is not enough, but if we start breaking lower, then we're probably going to go to the 18,000 level and check that. So I'll be watching this just because there's some stocks that I'm interested in, energy stocks over there.
Sure.
But other than that, yeah, I think nat gas is really important because coming off of a really important long low, cotton's really important. So rest, I think you got it covered.
Great. Well, listen, everybody, rest up. There's no dog days of summer in August this year. We're going to be working, so rest up, and we'll see you next week. Barrie, great job, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Ben. Good job, and we'll see you guys next week. Have a good
Thanks.
weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.